What you got to do, right?
You do.
All right, folks, it is 5:31, so I'd like to call our meeting to order. Ask Sandra to record the attendance. Please take a look through the agenda for tonight's meeting, which should be on your screen and which Sandra circulated previously. After you've had a chance to look at it, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? All right, moving on to Article 3, approval of the minutes of our October 19, 2021 meeting. So take a moment to look through those minutes, and if no one has changes or corrections, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
We'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to Article 4, acknowledge visitors and those wishing to speak. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. I see that we have someone in the audience. Are you hoping to speak today? If so, please come to the podium.
My name is Craig Merlin. And this is my first meeting of the DDA that I've come to.
Welcome.
Well, you may not agree with that afterwards, but I wanted to talk about the last budget discussion in the last meeting and the minutes from that. The first comment I'd like to make, there was a spike in fund revenues, which can be attributed to the way income was calculated for the Tuffy loan. Now, I come from a finance background. Income isn't calculated differently for a loan or not for a loan. It may be under the loan documents, but your basic income statement is your income statement, whether you had a loan or not. So what could that sentence mean? Have no idea. Secondly, it struck me that you have a real opportunity to begin discussions with the Tuffy prior owner, since you guys are now the owners of the Tuffy site. If you have approval for their transfer as part of that estate plan, for trying to perhaps suggest a different location in the township that they might go to free up that site so that the township can be, and the DDA can actually have a plan to develop that area, now having both properties that are on that side of Cascade Road near the park. And because otherwise it's a long time to wait for all the lease extensions and the like. The third comment I'd like to make is that it struck me that in looking at these meetings, there was a lot of discussion about one even going to hiring a consultant to find a project to spend money on. If you folks don't know what projects should be priorities in the DDA, then maybe you have too much money in the DDA and some should go back to the taxpayers versus looking for ways to spend your money. The actual language that I was picking up on is, and it occurred several times, engineering item 851-000 contains $75,000 set aside for the DDA to start looking for a project they want to sponsor or consultant they could use to target future funding priorities and decisions. That suggests you're hiring someone to go find ways you can spend money. And that strikes me as something that is contrary to what you should be doing. You should have your priorities set. You should know what needs to be money to be spent on, and you should then hire consultants to help you spend it on priorities you establish or you in the township establish through the new survey that is going to go out and that new strategic planning process. That leads me to my last two comments. You talk about the complete street project list, and you talk about the turnabout at 28th and Cascade. And you say everyone's in favor of it except for the residents and business owners. And that's why you tabled it. Actually, you didn't say everyone was in favor of it except the residents and the business owners. What you said was that it had been put on hold due to concerns from residents and business owners. I can't think of anything more wretched than a roundabout. At least my wife can't think of anything more wretched than a roundabout at 28th and Cascade. But it again strikes me is if you're getting pushback from both residents and business owners, maybe it's something you just want to throw out rather than bring up yet again, and just take it off the table, throw it out, kill it. You talk about raised median sections on 28th Street, just north of Old 28th Street. I personally find the median strips, for example, in Centennial Park, to be absolute disasters waiting to happen. And I have a good friend who drove over one of those median strips, who was actually in town government and took out that pole that stood up because in a snowy day, he was on both sides, or his wife was on both sides of that median strip in Centennial Park. There's no need for median strips in Centennial Park. The traffic isn't going too fast there. Why would anyone ever put them in? Just like why would anyone put in a $225,000 or $250,000 welcome to Cascade at the 36th Street entrance or exit from the interstate? We don't need $225,000 to tell people we're in Cascade. That is just a waste of money. The last comment I'd like to make, and it's something you're going to be talking about tonight, is tactical urbanism. I haven't the foggiest idea of what tactical urbanism is, other than it appears to be something temporary or partial that you put in to see whether it works or not. I just like to see us spend money on practical projects that are what the citizens and the business owners want. And so with that, I hope tactical urbanism has some value, but I haven't seen it yet. So.
All right. Thank you so
I
much.
think
for your
your
comments.
buzzer was the 5 minutes.
It
wasn't
was.
Thank you.
Thank you much for your comments.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone who's joining us electronically, who may be wanting to comment? All right. Moving on then to Article 5, discuss the flower pot and landscape bed RFPs.
Thank you. So the DDA board, we've had a few conversations about this. And this came up from a business owner to put more flower pots down in the district along Cascade Road and Old 28th Street. So the DDA board asked staff to put together an RFP for the existing. We wanted to start small. So we talked about just doing an RFP for the existing flower pots for the planting. And then as well as that redesign of that landscape bed at 6820 Cascade Road, which is where the Citgo gas station is. So expansion, like I said, DDA felt it was better to start smaller rather than jump in big on this project. So certainly expansion of this project can be done at a later time, should the board feel that it's necessary or they would like to move forward with that. So I did put a draft RFP in your packet tonight. It is draft, so it may need some modifications. I am not a landscaper, so hopefully you had time to read through it. Obviously, there's some details in there that will be decided at a later date when we're ready to send this out, as far as when proposals are due and items such as that. But I think there's a few ways we could go on this. And, but I wanted to at least get this in there for now, included for those two areas. It could be a contract for 1 year. It could be a contract for, 1 year with an extension, perhaps, if the DDA felt that they wanted to extend it. But I'm just looking for some feedback from the board tonight on this RFP.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I've got a couple of questions, which may also be suggestions. When I'm looking at page, 3, under the criteria for evaluating proposals, do we want to specify here, as we do later on, that we're talking about healthy plants for all 4 seasons or for 3 seasons? Just to let people know that we're expecting some winter foliage as well.
Yes, we can do that.
Awesome.
Yep.
And I didn't see watering in the project details, but I also couldn't remember whether this is something that Building and Grounds would handle, or whether we would want to see whether they have like a self-watering proposal that they wanted to include.
So our existing pots that we have out have irrigation to them.
Got it. Okay.
So those are set. I'll have to check that landscape bed at Old 28th Street and Cascade Road. I will have to see, there may be some irrigation in that area as well, but I will check on that one.
See one
So
right in front of Sicko, is that what you're,
Siga, right, yeah,
Yeah. I've
pots
heard-
that are irrigated, is it dependent on them being in the exact same locations?
correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's, those lines come up from the bottom, yeah.
So maybe that too is something to include, whether or not, yeah, I don't know, something about whether the proposal connects to existing irrigation. If it doesn't, whether they have an additional quote for either modifying that irrigation or providing watering.
Okay,
Because it puts this supplier in a weird position if the township is going to be responsible for independently watering, but then the supplier is going to be,
or,
responsible for
plants.
healthy plants. So I
Right.
would think that we would want to quote from them to
yep,
water if water isn't supplied.
Or at least flexibility to talk with Buildings and Grounds and figure out what the best.
Yeah. Just something that they would have more knowledge about than we would.
Are we giving them a map of these areas? Much like we had in the previous, I think there was a map that we looked at.
right. So
Previously.
before we had a map with about 40 new locations,
yeah.
but certainly we can put a map of the existing pots in there and then the landscape.
I think that's
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah.
And on page 4, there's a mention about planters changing seasonally for spring, fall, and winter. So I'm assuming, and I'm an idiot, but I'm assuming that we're expecting the spring pots or plantings to last through summer until fall.
I'm sorry, that should say summer,
Summer too?
fall
Okay.
and winter, no spring.
No spring, just
Summer, fall.
Okay.
Right, yeah. When I talked to, when we were talking to Daylily about this, she said spring is too
Too tricky.
too tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that should read summer, sorry.
And that's really all that I had as I was looking through it.
How about something for like creativity? Because part of it is the whole point of having flowers is to make it kind of unique, and I don't know, I just don't want to pin someone down into, not that this does, I'm just trying to look at the language to make sure it's like, we want them to bring their ideas.
Do you want that to be one of the criteria for evaluating
I personally would.
creativity?
Should be.
Oh,
Yeah,
Because
some
that's why we're
design
not doing it,
criteria.
because we don't do flowers, like we want it to pop.
Yep.
Mhm.
If it were me, I'd do the hanging baskets on all those smaller light, whatever you call it,
The street lamps?
lanterns, street lanterns, the ones that are only in the downtown area. I think they look really nice.
But again, this RFP is just for this upcoming year for current
Correct.
pots
Existing-
before we look into 2023, where we may be
Or an
expanding.
expansion,
Okay,
correct.
want to make sure that.
So this is just our current, what we have, we're not making additional investments, because I was about to say, there was a discussion about, do we roll that out into tactical urbanism and try to get a dual purpose from certain things? Like the planners.
I think the intention was to take baby steps and to start with these existing
Makes sense.
issues, since they're kind of dead and gross. And then if we like where that's going to, it's
Right.
the technical term, right? Then we can broaden out into bigger or more widespread projects.
Makes sense.
And this would take the responsibility away from B&G
Correct.
for planting the current pots to.
And some maintenance,
and some
right,
maintenance
Design.
Yeah.
To this.
and design,
Yeah.
correct, yeah.
Do we want to specify in here a preference for Michigan native plants, or are we taking a little too crazy with that?
Let's just let them do it.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I've got a brown thumb, so. Other comments or questions about the draft RFP? I'm inclined to leave it to your judgment about the timing and the turnaround. That's, I mean, obviously the DDA will want to be involved in reviewing what is
Yes,
submitted, but the
Yeah, this would-
timeline for that is something.
I'd bring
we
this
can
back to you
hear.
with the changes before
Right.
anything goes out.
Okay.
Just question for the board, I suppose, on page 4, planters to be planted no later than the weekend of. Leave that up to the consultant or the landscape.
I don't know. I mean, because I know that we're gonna want it to be after there's any threat of frost.
Frost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know how to pin that date.
Week before
Are you
Memorial Day.
saying
or
when this
something.
contract would start, like when they would start the work, or?
When the plantings would be in
Actually-
place by,
So
yeah.
we should ask them for a schedule,
Yep.
maybe,
Right.
of what that would be
With,
as part of their
Put it back on
submittal.
the-
maybe with the thought that we'd like it to be done by Memorial Day,
Weather
Yeah,
dependent
you
or,
know, right?
Let's not start 4th of July.
Yeah, right.
right,
But
yeah.
put it on them, that they know the schedule. I
Yeah.
think I know who does ADAs, I think, and I'm gonna poke her. Reach out to her.
All right, any other comments or questions to share with Sandra before she makes these revisions? Okay, let us know if you need other information from us.
Yeah, and if you think of anything, certainly let me know and we can throw that in there too, but
Thank you.
we'll make these changes and bring it back to you.
All right, moving on then to Article 6, discuss DDA projects and tactical urbanism ideas.
So we did have quite a bit of discussion on this at our October meeting, and tactical urbanism, just to go over it really quick again. It's a low-cost approach to projects. It allows testing certain projects and areas before you invest a lot of money in, permanent infrastructure. So this just gives everybody a chance to see if it actually works or not. Chair Paplava did ask board members to send any tactical urbanism ideas to staff so that we could discuss those at the meeting. I did get a few from Michelle, and so I put those, you each should have a copy of those in front of you. So we can go through those if you want, and if you want to go through those, I'm happy to let you do it, or I can read through them and okay, and then if anyone else has any ideas, shout them out and we can talk about those as well. But so Michelle had 3 ideas. The first one was combining depaving, food trucks and pop-up cafes and retail in the parking lot at the center on Cascade Road. So the Thornapple Center down there. She also said D&W would be another alternate location. So certainly that Thornapple Center, it's been a source of frustration for residents in Cascade. You have some vacant properties down there. I think there is one vacant building in there at this time. So buildings are outdated, in disrepair, potholes in that area. So
You don't like aesthetic disaster?
Oh, yeah, I liked it.
Aesthetic disaster,
it.
yes.
So can I just ask for clarification on that Cascade Road one? Which plaza is that one?
So that is where the new Starbucks, right at the end of 28th Street and Cascade
Oh,
Road,
okay,
where the new
that plaza.
Starbucks
I
is.
just wanted to make
and-
sure I was thinking of
yeah.
the same plaza.
Formerly
Yes,
known as the
yeah.
Prevost Plaza.
Got it.
Right,
That part.
Prevost,
Yeah, right.
Danes, depends on what,
Danes, yeah,
what
sure.
era you are, so. So Michelle suggests, it would be a great area to test, turning it into a beautiful spot for food, entertainment, rotating basis, seasonal, outdoor venues. You could do maybe some food trucks down there, so on and so forth. So that would be one area.
That parking lot is huge.
It gets
It
full
is.
though. It gets full
It
with that
gets
full,
really?
yes.
But the
Weird
bigger
things.
concern that I have is it's private.
Yeah.
And
How
so
much
there's
we can get
additional
in.
complications, like can we use our tax increment financing dollars to fund a project?
On private
On private
properties. So
property.
I
Well, do we
do.
need, isn't the issue just permission?
Well, I have that question into the attorney right now, just to get clarification on that, whether it's a, yes, we can, but we need an easement, from the property owner, or whether it's a, flat no, or whether there's some partnership, possibilities. So I'm hoping to get that answer from them very soon.
But I agree. I mean, it's
So-
nice to have the thought of making that more vibrant with things like food trucks. And we talked years ago about putting up like a pavilion or a
Right.
farmer's market or something out
Mhm.
there. So
Yeah.
I think that we should definitely keep revisiting this, but we have to find out first whether we can actually put money toward it.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. and
That's an area.
This was just literally like off the top.
You know what? That's
And-
great.
Brainstorming.
And
Yeah.
start figuring out what can work and what can't,
Right.
and then morph it however it needs to. But yeah, like the idea of having a farmer's market down there would be great in the
Mhm.
summertime. And then other things going on, that's during the morning and into the afternoon, and then in the evenings and whatever else would be.
And we
really-
can, we did explore that a number of years ago, the farmer's market idea. And we can certainly explore it again. At the time, we talked to some of the farmers around here and they said there are so many farmers markets that they would not be able to find time to,
Mhm.
set up down there. They said there was an oversaturation at that point.
Yeah.
But
Ada's is
certainly
on,
we
like,
can,
Tuesday morning or something.
Right.
Like that.
yeah, but that's something, if
Right.
the residents are, we can certainly explore it.
Yeah.
Again, maybe things have changed, but,
And it
Um,
could be, it can be craft market. It can be, there's so many things that.
right.
Mhm.
Well, let's bookmark this to get more information from the attorney about whether,
Yeah, the private
you know,
property part.
whether this is a township thing or a DDA thing because of the financing concern. And then
Yeah.
we can bring it back around to talk strategy and other ideas.
Okay.
Do we have a list of any township owned land that we could possibly,
Do something.
even if you're
So-
tactical, let's,
In the district, we do own that parcel below Tuffy.
yeah,
We obviously own the Tuffy parcel, but they're operating right now.
Right.
And then our buildings in the district, so,
And
Don't we
where
own
we
this-
are right now.
and don't we own the property next
Yes.
door to us here?
yes,
Empty
yeah,
lot.
in this property here. Correct.
So along that vein, and something I didn't put on here, but there's these ideas about guerrilla gardening where if we have, because I know that we've got parcels of land that are on our roster, right?
Yes.
So that could be another thing that we could, whether they're community gardens or whatever, but if they're just sitting, doing nothing,
Mhm.
and they're in areas that either, it could be to beautify the area or to, create a community garden. That would be another idea.
Oh, I love
that
that idea.
Mhm.
I thought I saw a map at some point. Maybe I'm thinking of a map of the parks, but I feel
No,
like I've
there-
seen a map of,
There is.
We
a
can put
map.
one together.
yeah.
I thought. I don't remember what meeting I was in, but somebody talked about a map of
Mhm.
all of the,
Township properties.
yes.
But really, we want to focus on the ones that are in the downtown
District,
development.
Right, for our purposes. I mean, we can identify other
Right.
properties,
Mhm.
push them out the
Yes.
board.
Right.
but-
Yeah, we can put together a map with everything and then just highlight
Mhm.
That would be
the
great.
parcels in the district, so.
And there's the park kitty corner, what do we call it? The Township Museum Park?
The Museum Gardens Park. Mhm.
Should we put a big tree in that bump that's just empty?
Where? The bump that's empty.
The little hill, the
So-
knoll,
Where we put the
big tree?
Christmas tree, right? So we used to have a tall,
Right, right, right.
Is that
that-
weird?
Plant a new one?
A live tree?
Yeah,
Is that,
that's just personal.
wait, bad or good?
No, I'd love that.
Me too.
I would love to have a live tree there again.
It's kind of empty and lonely, and then you've got sad little fake tree. It's not totally sad, but like a real tree would look a lot
Well,
better.
yeah, I think it would be.
No, only some. Only some.
It's a longer term. Once it's planted and, if we have the funding that we can plant a fairly substantial evergreen there that.
I think
I
we
think
should look
everybody
into
loves
it. I
that.
mean, we want to be mindful that we're accommodating for growth. I mean, we don't want to get a big honking tree that,
Mhm.
you know, crowds out
Right.
the other things.
Maybe
that are
something
over there.
that's slower growing than, you know, but.
I
could
looked
be
at it.
there
I
for
don't
a
think it's
while.
gonna mess up the overall architectural design of the park.
Right.
This is
I don't think-
squarely
I think
outside
it'll
my
be
area.
fine.
I think it'd be nice.
I do too.
And that's one form of, it's not in your face urban tactilism, but part, like the trees up against the side of the road, sort of separate, but it's still a tree, naturally slows down traffic. That's kind of the stuff that you try to do within your
Mhm.
authority that you don't need road commission permission for to naturally slow down or distract people.
Let's.
We can look into that.
Explore that.
I can get some sizes and costs.
Yeah.
and-
Do we want to move on to Michelle's second idea?
Yep, I can read through that if you'd like.
Please.
So pop-up cafes, expanded outdoor dining. So with the COVID pandemic, this is for some of our local small restaurants to move some of their services outside. With, you know, gazebos, trellises, the Eskimo huts, so on and so forth. So really, she's just saying maybe we could, you know, dress some of that up a little bit and, you know, make it a little snazzier and better looking.
So do we need to get the planning commission involved in a conversation about that? Because my red flags are starting to go off about zoning and whatnot.
Mhm.
So.
Didn't we already
Are they
kind
gonna allow it?
of give the okay for this as a waiver during COVID?
So that
anyways?
expired
Right.
October 31st.
Hmm.
So they're not allowed in the parking areas anymore. Now, if they have an outdoor sidewalk,
Mhm.
they can get a variance to put some, you know, Eskimo huts or
Yeah.
something on their sidewalk area.
But anything that's a structure,
But
like a, you know, pergola or whatever, that might be something
That's an.
that might be something that requires a variance and might.
yeah,
Mhm.
anything, any structure type on the
Right.
sidewalk outside would require a zoning variance. This just would, with the temporary outdoor uses expiring, now they just can't spill out into the parking areas like we were letting them do during the.
I like the idea,
COVID.
though. I mean, it might, I don't know how we go about furthering that conversation. You know, we don't have any joint meetings on the calendar that I'm aware of, but I mean, do we make a recommendation to the township board or the planning commission if that's something that we would like to be considered, or what's the process?
To continue to spill out into the parking lot
Correct.
area.
Mhm.
We could, I know that it did go to the planning commission for their just discussion, if you
Okay.
will. And I think their, my understanding is maybe there was some pushback on that from the planning commission. We can certainly talk to them about
Sorry,
that
on
again.
extending what we were already doing, or? I'm
To
just-
make it more of a permanent, on a more of a permanent basis.
I mean, I guess
So
I-
that they wouldn't have, I'm sorry, so they wouldn't have to continue to come back, you know, to ask for permission and us just continuing to extend the deadline, so.
I'm just wondering how successful it was. for
Yeah,
the-
what
the
feedback?
Local businesses and.
Is there a need for it?
Right,
I
exactly.
mean,
So-
again, this is brainstorming of coming up with
Exactly.
ideas,
Right, right.
but for those businesses that have used it in the past,
Mhm. Where
now
it's-
that a lot has changed
Mhm.
from vaccines and so
Mhm.
forth,
Mhm. Is it
and
just-
staffing and so forth, because now I've got to provide somebody to go outside my building to
Right.
take care of guests that may be out there. Is it something that I even want to go forward with?
It's a
I've-
good question to ask.
I've heard from
Right.
the ones that have done it. We had probably a handful during the COVID season that took advantage of that. And then they slowly, you know, went away. But from the handful that did that took advantage of that, I just heard from one of the restaurants last week who said, we would love to keep doing this out in the parking lot area. So
I can't speak
but
to
that's-
how, I think it's a great question to ask, and I think we should expand asking the question to our other businesses in the district to see what they have to say, so we can get a representative idea.
a lot of the, I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
I was gonna say, by my office, I work on North Monroe downtown, and it's fairly permanent and really, really well used.
And they've pushed it like later and later in the season and put patio heaters out there. I've had some great dinners downtown, outside, in the cold.
A lot of the other restaurants that were doing it on their existing,
Sure.
you know, sidewalk patio, so they weren't
Patios,
spilling out into the parking area, so.
Well, I guess the key question will be, it's like, if you take a snapshot of the labor shortage that we do have, it may not work, but in the long term, could it be something? I mean, if it attracts a restaurant and say, even during the winter months, you're gonna have usable tables that you can generate revenue from and get more existing revenue from your footprint, you might attract more restaurants to participate in the area if there's an openness to something like that.
Mhm.
So it's something to think about. We've got only so much, there's a lot of vacant spots along the line. And if they're in our DDA, and if they can utilize the space in effective ways, it might be cost effective for them to proceed with construction options or options for them. And then also for existing restaurants, it may create a great revenue stream to be continuing to be good members of the community or business members.
It's a good
Yeah.
idea, and it's certainly easy to extend or reach out and get feedback for.
Right. I'm curious to know what the opposition was, because we'll want to take that into light as we're thinking about.
My
this.
understanding was, it was kind of not many restaurants took advantage of it, so do we really need to make all these changes?
Oh, gotcha.
And then I think there were a couple of people that said, well, a few restaurants took advantage of it, so let's maybe consider making that. So I think it was.
There's a couple things that you can argue for. I mean, from a small business standpoint, if someone is coming into one of the suites that's empty or one of the building that's empty, you're paying rent per square footage based on your indoor space, not necessarily your outdoor space. So that could be a way to attract someone that, hey, the footprint is 1,500 square feet, but there's 6 tables that could feasibly be put outside. So as a business owner, then you're going, okay, well, I'm not paying rent on that space per se, but the maintenance of it. So that could be something to consider. But I know parking has been probably our biggest issue. Our neighbor, Cascade Roadhouse, was extremely busy during that time. And that was awesome, because when they're busy, like obviously we're busy. So partnership to have, but in that area, there's actually a shortage of parking, unfortunately, because of how busy Cascade Roadhouse has been. So that's been amazing. But our problem has always been, on a Friday, if we have 15 parking spots, 3 of them are taken by our employees and 8 of them are taken by the restaurant, that doesn't leave a whole lot for our patrons. So it's always that back and forth. It's like, and that restaurant is so busy. How do you walk in and say, hey, who's 11 cars or whatever. So I think it depends on where it goes, and where we kind of target that saturation has to be an area that can take on more parking, especially if we're spilling into the parking lot, to provide for those outdoor seating. So I think there's a few things to consider to answer your negative as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think that should be part of the analysis, even if we don't have that specific feedback, when we're determining whether or not to grant requests for that extra space.
Where does it fall?
We should take into account, where does it fall and how will
How does it impact the neighboring
park-
business?
Yeah, neighboring businesses and parking, if at all.
It's gotta
So
be planned.
to me, a lot of this sounds like it falls under the planning commission's
It does.
responsibility, and it could be just simple from the one individual that's already contacted Sandra to ask for a variance to say, hey, we would like to extend, and then what are the parameters that maybe the planning commission sets up? I mean, again, I understand it's as a tactical urbanism idea and so forth. I don't know if it falls under the DDA perspective.
Right.
I think during the pandemic, we could definitely be a voice to say, hey, how can we help our businesses stay open, grow, more often stay open, and provide for their employees and for the owners. But I think at this point, again, based on how things have changed, personally, I think it may fall back to the planning commission for this decision to be made.
Right, yeah, this may be more of a zoning ordinance, either amendment or.
Right.
So if we're talking about prototyping spaces, though, if we have the ability to fund that as a sort of so if we're talking about tactical urbanism, it's really talking about prototyping space.
Mhm.
So if we're talking about using some of the DDA funding to help someone who wants to sort of try this out, I
Mhm.
guess that's where I was looking at for this specific idea.
Sure.
But the problem there is that you're then giving money to a private business.
I think in that situation, perhaps, maybe we own the structures and they're
But I don't,
under
we
our.
don't want to start and get involved in owning structures for private businesses. There's only so much we can do at the DDA level.
I mean, you
Well-
can toss a hay bale out there and, you know.
They
just
can. I
block
mean,
off the
literally,
space,
they
but.
can be-
But it'll be tricky.
I
I
understand.
certainly,
Right.
step one is to find out if
I
the
know.
planning commission's even gonna
Right.
allow.
I guess
This.
the question I have is, we have a couple areas that are underutilized, meaning there are a lot of vacant spaces, like for storefronts. If we took on something like that, where you created an outdoor dining space or something, that you had an open option to it, and say those landlords, there is something creative we could do, would that attract businesses to go into those spaces? And so that's a key question, because we're landing into how many years has it, I've lived in this area 7 years, and those spaces still are pretty vacant. During that time frame. So I don't know what the long range looks like. We've seen a lot of great growth on 28th Street, just in the last 3 or 4 years, but I don't know at a certain point, is there options? Because I think there's some good ideas being thrown out. Whose jurisdiction? Unknown, right? But vacant businesses or spaces is not a good thing in your community.
So then the issue is, how does a public body, and within the public body, or the Downtown Development Authority, what can we do? Because you can't, because it's public-private, right? That's a private
Mhm.
space, it's a private, and then we got to come up with those priorities. What's the most bang for our buck at the DDA level? I don't disagree with any of it. I just think like, this is kind of, urban tactilism is great. And the fact that Michelle, you even came up, this is great.
Well, I know it's tricky.
But
I
then if
mean,
you start
it is
giving out money like
anything-
structures, well, then go to every business and say, well, here's $5,000, do with what's gonna be the most, you know what I mean? Like, don't you get to choose what would be best? You want $5,000 for a structure? Well, would you rather just have the $5,000? What's gonna help your business? We're kind of going down a rabbit hole, I feel like.
Right, so before we go further in the rabbit hole,
Mhm.
let's find out if the rabbit hole is even available to us.
Mhm.
And we'll circle back to that at a future
Yes.
meeting.
I think Michelle's third idea, though, is probably something, so protected bike lanes, creating some type of area, utilizing large planters as barriers to protect bicyclists in the roadway. Now, then we're dealing with the road commission, but again,
Right.
this is not private property, if you will. It's something, that could possibly be done, so.
And it doesn't have to be planters. I mean, they can be other structures but the idea of
Right.
creating barriers for bicyclists to be safely on the side of the road. And I know that there's been lots of conversation about bicyclists want to be on the road because there's pedestrians on the paths and they don't want to, mess with that. And so this, and that was one of the things that was also in the complete streets. I mean, it's a pretty common tactic in.
Right, yeah, and even doing something on the bridge, which again is outside, the district, but that's a 5-lane bridge going across the river there. Maybe you can, and we hear about how narrow those sidewalks are. So maybe you could do something on the bridge to eliminate those 2 outside lanes to vehicular traffic, and put some barriers along there to try out for, a little wider pedestrian area, if you will.
The
So,
bridge is coming up on the high priority of, it's come to a boiling point in a good way, I would think.
Mhm.
It's,
Because of the car that went in the river, or?
no, that was just some teenager who literally everyone's like, oh my gosh, but that
Didn't
guy
even
would have
make it to
gone
the-
somewhere anyways bad.
I just, yeah.
The bridge wasn't his problem, but
All right, see you in our lane.
pedestrian, bikers, and there's a bunch of residents, and then it's the time has now come to discuss the bridge and
Mhm.
how we can get people and bikes safer over that area, and what can be done about it.
Awesome.
So there's a DDA on the other side though, so there's hopefully it'll cross over into an area that we do have
Oh,
some, pathway, a little bit of pathway or.
There's well, we don't get out onto the bridge, but we get up to, where do we cut off?
Verberg's and
Verberg
Tuffy,
all right,
right?
yeah.
What's the status with Tuffy? The only thing I'd ever heard was when Ben brought it up that all of a sudden we had the option to swoop in and.
Yeah, so we sent a letter back to Mr. Farland requesting some additional information. Our attorney went through the lease and there's some information that we need to consider, who the business is and some of their financials and that type of information. So we have not heard back from them yet, so.
Well, let's explore this idea of bike lanes or safer bike passage, whether it's on the walking path or on the road. I think that that's something that's very needed and very doable. So it'd be interesting to see what our possible options might be.
We're talking about limited streets though, right? We're talking
Yeah.
28th Street and then down
Oh,
a little bit Cascade is all we have really.
Really, that's all we have in our district. I mean, I don't know if Old 28th has, we could look at Old 28th. I honestly don't even know. If
Do we have a
there's
sidewalk there or
a-
something?
Is there?
there's
a
path,
sidewalk.
but
There's one from
not-
JT.
There's a
Yeah.
sidewalk on
GT side.
JT's side of
And
the street,
honestly,
but not on the
can we
other.
even slap a bike lane into the road without getting
It's
the
a
road
road,
commission
it's a road,
involved?
no.
So, yeah, let's look at all of our options so that we can make a choice about where we might see some success.
But I think that dovetails into our next discussion about talking about future plans, like the master plan, because I think a hypothesis has been for quite some time that because the traffic's moving at such a high rate of speed through that corridor in Cascade, that as we start to progress and expand parks where Tuffy's will be and what have you, the belief is that traffic may need to slow down a bit to allow for pedestrian traffic
Right.
to create that community space. And so I think as we talk about tactical urbanism, like if we believe that is something we need to do, or investigate that, is that truly going to help draw people to the area in the future? What are those options within our realm that can slow the traffic down?
And before we jump to strategic plan, I had a couple of thoughts similar to what you've raised up, Michelle, relating to the pedestrian crosswalks. We several years ago added the stamped concrete to try to slow traffic down and, show people that this is where people are crossing. We put up some signs. My thought, and I actually drove that way on my way to this meeting tonight, was to perhaps put some painted lines of demarcation on either sides of the stamped concrete and maybe some flashing lights on our pedestrian crossing signs, just to draw more attention to the fact that they're there. The signs are great and the stamped concrete is there, but this would be relatively easy, relatively inexpensive, and could have an impact. I don't know.
I saw one, it was online, but it's all about trying to slow traffic down without having to involve the road commission.
Right, exactly. Right.
So their way it was painted was like, so of course it was in Europe because it was outside the box and interesting, but the way it was painted literally looked like 3D, like you had to it was cool. It was really cool.
Yeah, I'm not recommending that.
Oh, I would, but I don't know how it works with the brick.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm not even talking about painting the brick. I'm thinking of putting the lines on either side of the brick. to
We're
make
not
it
the
even
first suburban
wider.
area that's tried to deal with
Right.
massive, or, quick growth. There's gotta be.
Well, I sent to Sandra right before this meeting, a link to, I don't know what it is, a guide that,
Yeah, for Vermont.
yeah, that Vermont, put together a guide, and there are examples, and there's bikes and there's roundabouts and there's, all crosswalks. They have spaces, and maybe I'll send that out to everybody in the group so that you can see it. But it was and it had everything from examples of before and after to how to,
Oh,
this
that's
is like
interesting.
guerrilla style, like here is the paint you need, and here is the,
Right.
it was really very, it was inspirational, but
Yeah. There's a lot of great ideas out there. We just have kind of that extra level of what's the word I'm looking for?
You're talking about the road commission?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So
We just have
hard
that
to
extra
push
layer
through.
that we need to deal
So
with.
do we need
so-
road commission permission to paint the crosswalks?
I bet we do.
But
Well, they
we just
own the
have to
road.
talk, I mean, I haven't, we've,
But that might
We
be
haven't
something
reached out,
maybe.
yeah.
I have to believe that that would be low hanging fruit. Steve,
Mhm.
With that said, in regards to involving the road commission, and I'm not sure what communities I've seen it in, but at crosswalks and when a walker pushes the button up on the pole, I mean, there's just flashing lights.
Yes.
We've talked
You
to them
know,
about
so it's
that.
like,
Yes,
whoa,
they don't like
something's,
that?
you know, so as I'm driving, it's
doesn't
like,
like
whoa,
it? The road
something, you
commission?
know, something's up there. That's a non-like, is that what you said?
So in the communities that I've seen those in, and
Yeah.
maybe you've seen something different, it's, you know, you push the button, the lights flash and all the traffic stops so that the pedestrians can cross.
Right.
Yeah, the road commission was not
Okay.
okay,
interested in
but
that. Or we've seen some too where the lights are actually in the crosswalk
Well, that's interesting.
that
Mhm.
flash, and they were not interested in that.
I could
either.
see
Had they
that
dealt with
distracting
those at
people
all?
too.
Because one of them was in Colorado and I feel like they would have snow plows on those.
Brighton actually has some of those.
Hmm.
But,
So
and we talked to the road commission about this, I don't know, a handful of years ago. Sometimes you have to let things, you know,
Simmer.
simmer. So, you know, quite honestly, it's worth bringing that stuff up again to
Yeah.
them. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good, maybe we can have somebody from the road commission come to one of our meetings or a couple people. Because I'm wondering what their reservations are,
Yeah. They
because
look
we're
at it
trying to
from
save people's lives.
traffic flow. Yeah, and they're
Uh,
looking at like safety, they all look at, they're really good and they work with, I think, however much they can, but they're looking at it from engineers, traffic flow,
I
blah,
get
blah,
it.
blah.
I get it, that's
Yeah,
why I
they-
think.
they
it
wanna
would be
move traffic.
Helpful to
we
understand.
want to slow it down.
No,
And we're trying to
they're
slow it down and
going
make it
a
for
little bit the
bikers and
opposite.
pedestrians.
Right, yeah.
They're worried about cars and we're worried about pedestrians and bikes.
Right,
The two don't go, the three kind of.
It would not hurt.
Gotta be a
I
way
think
to
we
make
should
it-
organize our thoughts before we invite them in, so that we
Yes.
can say, this is what we're thinking of, and then get input. And I don't know that it needs to be during a DDA full meeting, or whether it needs to be a smaller conversation first and then a DDA meeting, but yeah, let's get our list together and then engage them so that we know what they're gonna.
to understand. kind of
Maybe
where
early
they're
next
coming
year
from.
we can-
Sure, I think that makes sense.
Is
It's a
there-
little unrealistic to
Is
think.
their
we're gonna do
leadership the same as it was 5 years ago? Or has there been some shifts?
It's the same.
Okay.
And because I know we're talking about Kent County Road Commission, is there a state road commission or something like that?
MDOT?
So MDOT.
Do they oversee?
They don't.
counties?
So MDOT, we do have some MDOT jurisdiction in our township, just west of the interchange. So kind of the interchange area towards Patterson falls under MDOT jurisdiction. Frankly, I think they're even more restrictive than the road commission.
The other reason I bring
quite
that up is
honestly.
just from the perspective of if MDOT, you know, is working with the entire state and they're working with the counties and so forth. I gotta think that there is already a bank of ideas out there that's being used,
Mhm.
you know, as compared to us at a local DDA
Yes.
making a bazillion phone calls out to every community. What are you
Yes.
guys doing differently? For them to be able to come and say, hey, here are some things that we recommend, or some things that have worked, or some things that we agree with, you know, to kind of give us a starting point
Yes.
as far as us saying, you know, where can we plant a seed? Instead of saying, this is the tree that you're gonna grow, so work from the tree and figure out how you're gonna get there.
Yeah, the master plan, that's what you, then they come to you with that, they should come to the DDA with ideas and different choices. This isn't on you guys to start, I should say us.
Right.
Would they, though? I mean, I know they were
MDOT?
involved.
Or the road
Road
commission.
commission. I know that they were involved with the complete streets process, but.
Right. I think they would come,
They
yes.
come to the township, I'm supposed to, they deal with the township and then, but within the master plan, then that should be presented to the DDA with choices. It's not on the DDA to. I mean, it can be, you can do as much as you want, but you guys are volunteering your time. I mean,
I,
Yeah, I personally, I think that it should come from the top down. to a
yeah, I
certain
do
degree.
too.
This is what's available that we'll agree with, as compared to you guys banging your head against the wall, trying to make something work that we're just not gonna allow them to work.
There's got to be another, within Kent County, there's got to be something that they have allowed and addressed the problem. There's enough roadways and if
Exactly.
there's a precedent that they did,
Exactly.
that can be leveraged. The door was cracked, had to have been cracked somewhere.
I think the DDA needs,
That busy of a road though,
there needs to be more
Valid
information
point, yeah.
sharing.
because I see the smaller communities. makes a
Well,
lot of
would you
sense,
like to
but
make
they-
that phone call to the road commission to see
Sure.
what information they could give us?
Why don't you talk to Ben first, because we're already. Ben was already supposed to be making that. I think the DDA needs better updates, more information. I mean, we have a master plan, right?
So that's the
It's
next
outdated,
item
we're
on the
coming up on
agenda. Actually, the strategic plan.
No, I know, but the strategic plans then leads to an updated master plan, like, we
Mm-hmm.
paid good money for our old master plan that had a lot of plans within the DDA.
So something that we used to do in past years was to have joint meetings.
And then
Like
we should,
I think we need to do,
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm talking to the right lady. I mean, and not just the DDA and the township board, but the DDA and the planning commission and, Parks
Zoning
and Rec,
board and
zoning board, get everybody together in one room to talk about what's going on and what priorities are important. And it doesn't necessarily have to wait until we have the strategic plan initiatives. I think that it would be helpful just so the DDA knows what's
well, it'll be
going
like
on.
January, Feb, so this, yeah, are we up to this Article 7 yet?
We are, I think we are, unless there's more tactical urbanism to discuss. We've kind of already crossed over into discussion of the strategic plan. All right, I'm hearing no-
was good.
What'd you say? You thought, I like three.
Was good.
I like,
They're all,
I agree
no,
as much as I could do.
they're all good.
I'd love to see all of them. It's just, we have to figure out what obstacles are in between us and
Right.
getting there.
Right.
Okay, so strategic plan update, ladies. Where are we?
So there's a letter that is penned by our township supervisor that's going out this week, right? Grace, it didn't go out today, but
I don't think it went out today, but it,
by
if
the end of
not,
the week, it's, so
hopefully tomorrow.
it's basically a preview letter to
whom?
to the residents of the township. That basically is talking about this survey that's coming out. So it's just opening the door and saying, we're excited about getting feedback and listening to you. So please fill out the survey. Obviously, I'm totally paraphrasing. So then the survey should be going out
3 or 4 days after that, next week.
Next week. And so the plan is that survey goes out, we'll start looking at what response level we're getting on the survey. And then after the holidays, if it's low, or if we're seeing areas that are not, certain areas within our geography that are not responding, that we'll do another push in January.
Early
So-
January,
Pardon?
early January.
Early January. Yeah, right after the holidays.
Is
Then we'll look
the-
at meetings.
is this survey a physical paper survey that's going to be mailed out? Or is
It's
it going to be
multiple,
a
multiple.
link? You can go online, fill out the survey there. Okay, so they
Yeah.
have accessibility.
Yeah,
Because you may get you may just get some people that say, now I've got to put it in an envelope and send it back to you. Yeah,
Right.
It's too much for me to do that.
right, right.
I'm just being
So-
honest. I
Yeah, no,
totally-
no, no.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we had a lot of discussion about making sure that we were sort of, who's our audience? How are we gonna reach them?
Yeah.
So it's going out in multiple forms,
Yep.
lots of communication over multiple channels to really work hard to get a reasonable response rate back. And this survey is pretty high level, so the objective is really to ascertain what are the priorities for the respondents within the township, the things that, they're really most concerned about, and what level of involvement and engagement do they want to have? Do you want us to keep sending you information about this, project of developing the strategic plan? Do you not want us to talk to you at all? Do you want to, but it's literally, I think it's 11 questions. And it's really sort of, so this was a mock-up of and there's a couple of tweaks that they had to make. So there's a map that's going out. So one of the questions is asking, kind of what area do you reside in? And then the questions are really starting out with, are you a resident, you're a property owner, you're a business owner? Kind of getting some demographic information. For upcoming strategic plan process activities, how would you like to be contacted? So we're asking them again, so the approach is more about, this is an audience that we really want to reach. We want to make sure that we're doing what they want us to do in terms of connecting with them. And then is that we start guiding the rest of the process in terms of these workshops that are going to be happening. And the workshops will be happening both with the public and addressing these sort of top 5. And then also with the other
for this TDA and planning commission, that kind of stuff. So you'll have people who are more residents and businesses.
So has the consultant told you what the
parks survey that had just gone out? You probably remember those
So
numbers. I don't.
So 4 years, the park survey, and just like a master plan, you're required for parks, it's every 5 years. They're overdue, but our last parks one from 5-6 years ago, they said, well, that's pretty standard. And then this past one, we just did it, got them back last month, and it was 970. And that's because we sent a paper postcard with a little, we made a tiny bit more effort, and 970. So
that'll just change a little bit too. Like being able to send a QR code and push it through social
definitely
media is
helps.
helpful.
I don't know what they did last time.
So did the consultant say that that's reasonable to expect similar response to what we're sending out for?
Well, I guess we don't know that. I think it's going to be much higher than 970, because at the same time, we're putting in, the little posters. It's that QR code, the scanning with the website. It's going to go in Sugar Mamas. We can drop it off at, to put in whatever local businesses.
I'm just
you'll see
curious
it.
about what the,
Yeah, I don't
the
know.
industry standard is for response to.
I don't
survey.
think so.
Percentage.
Yeah, in terms of
Yeah.
percentage.
I mean, we were told 165 was standard, and then we got 900 stuff. So it just depends on who you ask. But there's going to be a blitz, and they're going to.
Okay, so after the workshops, what you anticipate that happening February-ish?
Starting
Starting
second half
February.
of February.
And then ending?
I think that's gonna have to go for at least 2 months. So that puts us into April. And depending on, so a lot of this is uncharted territory for the township in terms of an approach. So I think it could vary a little bit depending on what comes out of those workshops and whether it sends, it's like doing research. You learn one thing, it sends you off into another. So, it could push out maybe another month. And so instead of 2 months, it's 3 months.
Mhm.
So I think realistically to have, okay, so the other part that I think is interesting and helpful is that so we've talked about the communication being really steady, frequent, and in real time in terms of what the responses are, the data coming back on the surveys, so that it'll be much more like a live feed as we're getting information on some regular basis, and actually giving that information back to the community, so that they feel like, oh, I actually know what's happening with this. So rather than there being sort of these big gaps of time from when the survey is done to what some big report that comes out, that information will be kind of on an ongoing basis on some frequency that, depending on what we get back and how much we get back.
Steve?
So I'd like to go back to, Michelle, you talked about the fact that these surveys are going out to all the residents. And then based on those individuals that respond, that's going to be your core group that then you're going to be then communicating with thereafter.
No.
So,
Because you're saying if I don't want to be, I don't want to be contacted or I don't want to be included, then we're not going to email them anymore or mail things to them. And I
Right,
can
so-
understand that from a cost standpoint, because if I'm not going to respond to anything, save your 55 cents or whatever it is to send the information to me. But I'm just kind of curious if the pool of people,
Mhm.
we're starting with all residents and businesses, and you get 5% of those people responding. So now those 5% are the ones that we're going to be taking a lot of information. You may still send something via Facebook or via electronically to say, hey, we still would love feedback. This is the point that we're at. If you would like to, so to speak, jump in at this time and
right.
give us more feedback, you're
Right.
still allowed to do that.
So the site itself will be live. So there's a site that's going to be set up, and that's where the survey will be, as well as any new information. So data that's coming in, any updates on, sort of where the process is, things like that will reside there. So the push in the beginning to get the surveys out and then asking people, how much do you want to be involved in this process? Do you want us to continue contacting you? They say no, then I don't, it's a good point, because do we want to at some point maybe circle back and do another communication to the broad population to say, hey, here's where we are now. You said you didn't want to know anything before, but here's some information. If you're interested, here's the site, you can go to it. So put the onus on them.
Yep.
Well, that's why we're doing
That's
the
a good point.
postcard. It costs a lot more, but every single resident is gonna get a piece of paper in the
Yeah.
mail that,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
at some point we'll.
I
have-
think initially I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic that we do that.
But then, I'm trying to think how much more, I mean, at some point.
Well, but back to Steve's point, I think that it's important to keep everybody
Right.
involved and engaged, so that if people who decided to tap out after getting the initial postcard or survey decide, oh, wait, you've picked these 10 projects and I strongly disagree with 8 of them, and I want to
100%,
be
yeah.
able to
Yeah.
provide my input, that they
Right.
will both be made aware of it and they'll have another opportunity
Right.
to be engaged.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And within this process too, will individuals be able to, especially if it's an electronic survey? I don't know why anybody would, but because they're very passionate about a specific project, I'm going to go in and fill out this survey 10 times to get 10 votes towards this project.
Yeah, we talked.
We
And
just had
or
good
get my
questions.
neighborhood together to say, everybody, I need you to,
Yeah.
we want this to happen. And there again, I don't want to be pessimistic but
No, we actually had this conversation in our last meeting, and what was decided was that, there is a way. Multiple times. Digitally, right? They said that, if people are really, then they're gonna go to different, I'm gonna use your laptop and in different.
it's a lot of work
right?
to get it
It's a
done. but
lot of work. So
God bless
the
them.
chance that their feeling is, the chances of that happening are kind of slim, but
Yeah.
that there will be some, you'll see some anomalies in the responses and even the data itself. So they said, if we see like one project, one area that is really skewed, we can go in and they can go in and take a look at that and see if it's something that, it's just skewed the data so much that we
Yeah,
need to
don't
go back and.
want you
revisit.
spending a lot of time into that minutia of figuring out, so to speak, voter fraud.
Which they said it's
However-
not worth, yeah, it takes a lot of time and so.
Yeah.
But they said we can spot, sort of big blobs that,
Sure.
big blips on the.
Okay.
Do you
Does
remember,
this
Michelle, why that was, because it's true, why the reasoning was to not limit it to one survey per device? Remember how there was the,
Yes, and they said that they don't like doing that usually when they do these surveys. And I'm not
was
sure.
it because like if a family had a computer or something, although now phones are, I'm trying to think, I can't remember, they did the.
And they said that they've never really had like any big issues with, somebody taking the time to really make an effort to do all of this work. Just because there's one thing that they really want to, like stack the voting on.
But I think it comes down to sample size, right? If
Yeah.
you had 165 respondents, a small group of people can sway all your results. If you're engaging the broader population of Cascade Township, you're able to get 1,000 response and you can push north of that. You will wash out that noise theoretically. And so I think that's the key, your key way to battle that is less on the technology side, because we just don't have the pockets for that. From my point of view, I think it's more on the broader participation that we do get, the more it gets washed out in the rich data that we do get, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And I think that's probably what we're gonna have to rely on, because I'm assuming that the survey hasn't been formatted in a way to require authentication. In, either by
You mean by?
address or surveys are even set up.
And this survey is gonna be big. I know picture like 20,000 feet or something, but then the focus then after the holidays will be DDA, like different areas.
Right.
So let's talk more. We talked about the workshops and the dissemination of information that comes after that point. So what happens after all that information is collected? Like at what point in time is the message then distilled to the different committees and boards to say, okay, these are things to pursue? Because I'm trying to think forward for our DDA calendar,
Right.
because we're already in like, summer of next year. Is our involvement even going to happen in 2022, or is that something that is not going to happen until 2023?
No, it'll happen. It's just, I don't know. There's no set formula. I don't know. In January, February, we're gonna have some focus groups and I don't know.
Well, we
I'm trying to
talked
think.
about the fact that, once all of this work is done, then a strategy plan actually has to be developed, meaning written.
Mhm.
And that really is what channels to each of the separate boards and commissions within the township in terms of, where the priorities are.
Yeah, the goal is to have a kind of a unified vision for where it all fits within every little different commission or committee, but kind of ultimately a master plan. So, the planning commission, the DDA, that kind of stuff, we have a vision for what priorities are in the township. And then more information you guys have from.
Well, something I think
Better.
we're missing from what we talked about last meeting, this meeting is that this is a stage gate process. This is a project. There has to be a defined beginning and an end. And there is variables that will happen in between. But it feels like we can map out a beginning, starting pistol goes off, and you have checkpoints along the way. Now, life does change between those 2 points, or those bookends. But from my point of view, it's very from you have a survey that goes out. You've allowed for public discussion. You're going to get results from it. Unless it sends you in 20 different directions, you are then going to take that information and you have to run that information now through a process, whether it's through the DDA or whoever, these different bodies and groups. Then outputs come from that, and then you allow for public discussion. And then you move on to the next phase, because now you just took more information in, and then you move on to the next phase. But there's there's defined checkpoints at each one of these stages, and there's a beginning and an end that you allow for people to have the discussion and the right discourse. And then decisions are made, you move on to the next one. So I think we can outline a clear map of who needs to be involved, when a consultant needs to be involved, and then at what point we're kind of arriving at the finish line. Instead of kind of where I feel it's kind of, it could be within this year, it may not be, it could take 3 months. I think if we define that, and then if something has to change, then that's an open discussion. These are the reasons why.
So the part of the discussion, and you know, I had said I brought it up before to the consultant and said, asked for milestones and said, you know, we need so that, and we talked about it in the last meeting, which was just last week. And this is where we were talking about what does this time frame look like? This is where we came up with, you know, and they were like, all consultants, well, we'll do that in March. And we're like, how about February? So
January.
yeah, so I mean, realistically, with the survey going out and all that sort of thing. So we again said, and they, by the way, have to come back now because the proposal that they first submitted has shifted quite a bit in terms of their scope. And so there's some additional things, and they need to map that out, not for us, for the township board to look at and say, okay, now you've got a new charter because now it's been better defined based on this new information or new process that we're going through. And again, you know, we're looking for the consultant to come back with a schedule.
So is the consultant billing based on the entirety of the project, or is there an hourly fee
Oh,
baked
it's a
into this?
quote, and then if they go over certain, then. but
Oh, I
that's
hate
using-
that. Sorry,
Slow.
visceral reaction. I'm surprised, and I'm not, that the consultant hasn't put an end date on it, because hearing that they've got some, you know, opportunity to kick the can and prolong the process if they.
Which is why we're pushing to say, you've got to, and
I
we
think
had
this
the
is being,
discussion. We had the discussion in the last meeting around, you know, I think they're, and I don't know if I think they're trying to do the right thing, right? They don't want to give us something that's meaningless because they don't have enough information yet. But we talked about, they said, well, we don't even know, you know, like how many of these workshops. And I said, well, if we're asking in the survey for people to identify 5 top things, then let's start with 5. Because that's what we're going to get back, right? So let's say we're going to have 5 workshops on the, at least, and then if, to your point, if it morphs a little bit as we're getting more information back, you can adjust, right? You can come back and say, here's what we learned in this phase of the project. But I kind of would like to see from them phases and with milestones.
I
for
think the
each of
initial
these
one took
phases.
long. I think it took a lot longer to get that survey out. That was the hard, it took. too
Yeah.
long. But the whole point is getting community, it's like starting, as opposed to
Right.
when I went back through minutes before, we had a consulting firm that sent it to the community development director that said, we're gonna show this, we're gonna show the public what they want, that kind of thing. You had people that were upset, feeling like the priorities, like I kept hearing about this gathering space at the library, but it didn't go anywhere. So the whole point, it takes a little bit longer to get off the ground, but to get, I don't know, it didn't go anywhere.
Well, I'm not gonna revisit.
I'm
all the
not trying to, I'm
reasons
just trying to
behind
say,
all
but to
that.
get everybody, so it's a little bit of a slower start.
I think
but
that
to
all
get-
we're looking for, though, are those milestones, the timeline, the milestones that you've
Right,
asked
so
the
that we
consultant
can-
to provide. And again,
Right.
feel free to make us, or me specifically, the big bad.
Already, yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to always be the person. But I think that it's important that we understand what the timeline is, both for controlling costs and also so that we can make our plans as a DDA about what other projects we may want to invest in the meantime, because we won't be, if we can't expect anything to be resulting from this strategic plan until the end of next year, then we know that our dollars can be allocated to other projects in the
I think
meantime.
we
I
can
don't-
push, it's not gonna be.
No,
that
I
long.
think it's,
We have to. push
I don't see
for
how it could be
sooner.
sooner, though. If we, I would love for it to be sooner, believe me, but if you're saying that the workshops won't be over until early summer,
no,
And
I
that-
think
then-
it's before then. I think, I don't,
okay,
we'll get whatever we
April,
can get for you guys. as
and
far
it'll
as-
take them a month to do a plan, and then you've got to interface with the boards, and then we're into fall. And I mean,
That I agree. Fall
Yeah,
is
so-
probably realistic.
so if we, let's say fall, we get the green light and a list of projects.
You're not gonna get a list of projects, you're gonna get priorities and
Okay.
feedback, and then it's up to the DDA to go through it with,
Exactly my point, which means if
You're
we're
not
planning
gonna
out
get-
projects for 2022, nothing that comes out of the strategic plan is going to be on that list of projects that we're completing in 2022. It'll be in the future.
yeah, the whole. The strategic plan is not meant to tell the DDA what to do, it's to give you guys feedback for what people want, so it's more likely to have successful projects.
Okay, but we won't have that feedback.
No.
I think
Until-
spring, maybe summer, but maybe I'm unrealistic, I don't know.
Well, let's,
The feedback.
the
will start
person,
coming
the
back
people
in
who need to tell
January.
us are the consultants.
Right.
They just need to
Which
give
is
us the
what we're
milestones.
asking
Yeah.
them for is to say, what does this timeline look like? When are we gonna be done?
But I think
When
it's a
are-
balance between the consultants and us who have hired them, not saying the DDA, I'm talking about the township.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
We have a desire to get traction.
Yeah.
So you work with the consultant to design within a reasonable timeline, what we want to accomplish. And now we've hired a consultant because they are an expert in this. So we should be able to have a defined timeline and to reach the goal that we want to reach. We've learned hopefully from the past, right? From some things that have worked and that haven't, and how we engage our township. But you can bake that into the methodology of how you approach this project, how you engage the community and layer in the timeline with it.
That's what we're doing,
No,
there's just a lot going on. Like,
No,
we're-
no, I understand that, but we don't have a concrete timeline that is written out with key milestones of just project management. And this isn't a critical statement. This is like, so how do we, really button this up where we clearly know every step that we're doing in the design of this that then leads us to the timing of which we need to make concrete decisions at each one of those stopping points or what have you. Because it's a process and it's really important we get it right.
Well, and it sounds like we'll hopefully be getting that, or the township rather, will be getting that from the consultant.
Yeah.
in the
and I
near
mean,
future,
What
so-
I've said to the, and I mean, Grace and I have talked about this and what I've said to the consultants is it also helps the steering committee to know what the expectation is for us, right? To get the work done that we have to do. So I said, if you can please, get this timeline put together, give us some milestones so that we know what work we have to get done.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we could spin and spin and
Right.
spin and we know how that works. So, yeah, so I am continuing to, yeah, and if I send them an.
Want to borrow the
email, I just-
gavel?
Yeah. But no, and I said in the last couple of meetings, the DDA is looking for that guidance, from the strategic plan to know where our priorities should be. So I just keep saying it.
Okay,
So.
good luck. We'll keep you on the agenda.
At least now we know, the survey, when the workshops are gonna start, and that at least got some
Mhm.
grounding in terms of what are we gonna do when? Now we just have to take it to that next level and say,
And
okay,
Yeah, tell them they need to, take it
Output.
to the finish line.
right,
and give us
output
the-
and implementation.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you much. Any other items regarding the strategic plan update? Grace, did that pretty well.
Mhm.
Other questions before we move forward? All right, 2022 meeting schedule is in your packet.
Is in your packets. As you know, meetings are held the third Tuesday of every month, so the schedule does reflect that. The schedule will not be approved by the board until generally at their December meeting, but I at least wanted to get the dates out to you. So As in the past, we'll have 2 informational meetings. We'll just set those up. Usually we have one a little earlier in the year and one, in the fall. But we can set those up as we need to.
Perfect.
And
I'd
then-
love to see some joint meetings on there, Grace, if you can enable
Sure.
that.
That's the plan.
And they don't need to be on our schedule, but if the board is willing to move forward with a joint meeting, then just communicate that to us, Sandra.
I think it makes sense depending on what that schedule looks like, right?
Yeah.
If it comes at those right points when we're making those key decisions, so we're all kind of rowing as one.
Agreed.
Because then there's just back and forth. If we're just meeting once a month, it's just going to keep prolonging this process.
It would be far more efficient to discuss it.
Right.
Yeah, some things as a whole. All right. Did you have anything else regarding the 2022 meeting schedule, Sandra?
I do not.
All right. Article 9, any other business?
Our next meeting is December 21st. So I guess I'll leave it up to the board. If you, sometimes in the past, we have canceled that meeting. It's up to, I'll leave it up to you to let me know.
I vote we cancel it, but I'll come if you guys want to do it.
Well, I don't know that we really have anything pressing for the agenda. Do we? I think that most of
No.
our initiatives are pretty much pushed until January anyway. But let's wait to make the decision to cancel until we get a little bit closer so that we can be sure
Okay.
that there isn't anything that we need to discuss. But I agree, typically, particularly given when it
And it's a tough
falls.
timeline of that week of Christmas from a business standpoint and personal standpoint. There's a lot of people who are transient or fully engaged in life of their business.
Agreed.
Is your business crazy busy at Christmas time?
Hopeful,
Yeah,
yeah.
right, that's the plan. I imagine that.
Yeah, if we're not, I've got a
Biggest-
rough January.
I've got it with you. I don't want to jinx it.
And nobody wants to cook, so Culver's is busy.
Yeah, there's no sure bets in life.
That's true.
For
Especially in
sure.
business, yeah, small
Yeah.
business, yeah.
All right,
If they're
so,
gonna bank on alcohol at the holidays,
right, well,
but
but
still,
responsible
no
use of it.
guarantees.
In the past, it's been a safe bet.
You'll have me as a customer, I
People
promise. I'll be there.
There as well.
I
Looking for
can't
the
think of
bourbon.
anything better than Culver's, nothing but cakes and your.
One of these days, we'll have all three at a meeting.
There's our
We'll have a
first
party.
street stall right there. Culver's, awesome. Nothing but-
That's
Bring your
it, I mean-
chocolate wine.
We might get more people in
Vanilla
the,
custard. We'll have cake there too.
in the audience. if
Outstanding.
we
I
start
take
doing
care
that.
as well with a lot of beverages.
All right. I'm refocusing us away from the booze and sweets and Culver's. Any other business?
One more thing, I just wanted to let everybody know, we are having the tree lighting ceremony this year. It is Sunday, November 28th. It will be at 5 o'clock, 5 to 6:30 down at the museum garden. So
Thank you much.
you can-
So is there a plan for the fire department and or Santa to
Santa
participate?
and Mrs. Claus
Oh,
will be there. They will come down on the fire truck.
Excellent.
So
That feels
yes.
normal.
Yes,
That's
they
great.
they are both able to attend this year. So,
Wonderful.
yes.
Are there any new updates in the township? I know we're towards the finish line. I'm sorry, but like usually you have great updates at the end of new businesses coming in, or if we've had some closures or anything that we should just be aware
So
of.
we just had a great ribbon cutting ceremony for Rebel Nutrition. They are in the Cascade Center.
You saw the post,
Um,
right? You
yeah.
guys posted about that.
Yeah, so that was awesome that they were there. Cycle Bar has opened there on the where the Leo's is. That is a cycling fitness business.
Mathnasium, Euro Bistro, that.
So like,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, yep, in there. I'm sure you've all seen that Clean Eats is open. They opened a couple months ago. So they have opened.
I saw some banners about beer making or something.
Yes, there is a craft beer shop in the Cascade Center as well, 2 doors down from Rebel Nutrition.
Okay.
So yes, we have had some
There was
movement.
a Demolition of a building by
Just gonna ask.
Electric Cheetah, correct?
Oh, yeah, that little,
Yeah, so that
Oh, the
old
old hotel
hotel is
thing?
coming down, so Tommy's Car Wash will be
We'll
building
taking
there.
Over that whole swath.
And then they're going to have a little separate coffee shop in that area. as
Interesting.
well,
So what's the entrance and exit situation like for that car wash? You know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Good
so they
question.
had to, I haven't seen the final site plan yet. I know they had to close a curb cut and move some things around,
Okay.
but
So I
Yeah.
think it's off 28th Street, but
it is on,
Sandra's point, they had to
yes.
close off the Pizza Hut.
Okay,
Yeah.
And then also, I think there's an entrance through the PUD there, Macatawa Bank. So
oh,
coming in through
really?
there and then getting into the car wash.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And what's the word on the Chick-fil-A? Where are we in the?
So
Oh, yeah, the
ironically-
long Road to Chick-fil-A.
Yes, we've been in communication with them, and ironically, we just received an email from them yesterday saying we'd like to start conversations again. So we will see if that leads somewhere.
Okay.
Have we lost any businesses recently?
Nothing that I'm aware of, so. no.
Good news.
It's a good way to end our meeting, unless anyone has any other business or any questions.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
I saw news articles about the Crown Plaza
Yes.
changing hands.
So they are doing a big renovation over there. And if you noticed, maybe 6 months or so ago, they were not the Crown Plaza anymore. They were just the Plaza Hotel of Grand Rapids.
Oh.
So they lost the Crown Plaza flagship. They're doing a massive renovation, and they will become a Sheraton hotel when they are complete with that. So
Interesting. What restaurant is in there now?
it's called Spice and
Some Indian places.
yes, it is an
Okay.
Indian place. Spice.
Okay.
I'm
Can't
drawing
remember
a,
the name of it.
yeah.
Interesting. All right, that'll be fun.
It'd
to
be good that
watch.
it's a share, going back under a,
Sheraton flag, yeah. Marriott flag, Sheraton type hotel, yeah.
So that did change hands recently?
The Crown Plaza or the Plaza Hotel a while ago, yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
a year ago,
in a
wasn't it?
bad way.
It's been a while,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh.
They've just been waiting.
Corporate.
Yeah.
Was that a Hilton Crown?
Crown Plaza, I think that fell under Holiday Inn,
Holiday Inn.
IGH, I believe, or IH. I always, yeah.
Okay.
I'd met the previous owner once, and then I think last year, from what I heard, he had an aneurysm and passed away.
Oh, maybe
So like
that's
that, and
why.
just kind of felt the family had no interest in
Ah,
carrying on I think they had,
Corporate was out in
What's that?
California.
the
for
corporation was out of California, they had hundreds of
Right.
properties, and I think they just, I mean, it was a big operation for it,
it's a
whatever.
massive building.
Yeah, it is.
I think
Yeah.
they're going to be downsizing. I heard that they may be shutting down some of the rooms or a wing
Oh,
to
interesting.
downsize a little bit.
All
Yeah.
right. All right, good to know. Any other questions or updates? All right, last item on the agenda is adjournment. Who would like to make that motion?
A motion.
Thank you very much. Any support for that motion?
I'll second.
Thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, we ran a little bit longer than, I like to keep things tight, but
Yeah, you can blame
good
me.
conversation.
Oh,
I
good.
always blame you.
But I left cake on your way out.